I did have another question. Are you're licensed to practice law before the federal district court sitting
Yes.
in Iowa?
Hmm. Hmm.
Have you actually had the opportunity to go before?
To practice law,
Uh,
yes. To answer your question, as lawyers in the audience and other folks who are familiar with law can say with some level of appreciation, the practice of law is kind of a difficult thing to define. It's more than just signing papers and filing things with the court. But at some points in my life, I've been more involved in the practice of law than I am now. I don't typically make court appearances unless I'm a witness now in litigation, primarily involving the city or a regional entity that I'm involved in. But I am a professional arbitrator also, so I'm a private dispute resolver in construction and commercial cases in particular, and in that way practice law. But I never really was somebody who wanted to wear a three-piece suit and go to court on a regular basis or sit in an office and go through kind of the rigorous legal research and legal preparation that's necessary to be a litigator. That was something that I decided a long time ago wasn't of particular interest to me. I'm glad there are people who do it. I'm just not one of them. But yeah, I've got a legal background and certainly enjoy it and draw on it from time to time. But I'm happy I don't look and necessarily act like a lawyer.
okay. Um, let's see. I was wondering, did you choose Des Moines or did Des Moines choose you?
Like so many things in life, I think it's probably a little bit of both. I actually came back to Des Moines immediately from a job in Iowa City. I was working in Iowa City for what now is Mid American Energy, running their utility operations in eastern Iowa. Lived in Johnson County, lived in Iowa City, loved it, great city. Still try to visit there on a regular basis. But I had family here, and really, I had a situation with my father who was in kind of ill health about 15 or 20 years ago now that really had me in the track of wanting to get back closer to him and closer to my mother for some elder care issues. And for that reason, had my ears open about what was going on in Des Moines. Eric Anderson, who was city manager immediately before Rick Clark, now the current city manager, somehow got a hold of my resume or heard of me, made some inquiries, and we matched up well, and hence my decision to, leave the private sector and come to the public sector. I've been in the public sector now for about 15 years. I'll be here hopefully for a few more years, but then probably go back to the private sector. So it's really a situation where I chose Des Moines and Des Moines chose me. Hopefully it's a situation that works to both of our benefits. I know from my benefit, I very much enjoy working for the city of Des Moines and being back in Des Moines.
Okay. Um, that's great. So you mentioned a few other cities or places like Wisconsin and Colorado. And I was wondering, when you do planning and programming for the city of Des Moines, are there other cities that you use as a model for what you do here and the choices that you make?
There's certainly other cities that we look to for their excellence in service delivery. Phoenix is a great example of a city that certainly a few years ago in particular was kind of viewed as the touchstone, if you will, in my business for how they manage finances, how they handle leadership issues and planning issues. I have family in Phoenix, and know that everything that happens in Phoenix isn't necessarily translatable to Des Moines, Iowa, particularly when it comes to water issues. Obviously, they're a water scarce community, and we're not. But there are communities like Madison, Wisconsin, that I think are pretty important for us to look to for comparisons. Phoenix, I mentioned. Certainly, Minneapolis, St. Paul regionally are also pretty important to us. They're not really models per se, but they're comparative points. Our climate, as an example, is pretty similar to Lincoln, Nebraska, or Madison, or even to some degree to Chicago. So we look to them in how we measure our effectiveness, more likely in things like infrastructure and snow and ice control than we would Phoenix, as an example. But there's some leaders out there, Portland, Oregon being a leader in the environmental movement, Boston. I know Mayor County, for whom I work, here in Des Moines looks regularly to Chicago for insights in service delivery and insights into municipal management of services. So Chicago also being a pretty important one to us. But on the environmental side, I think Madison and Portland, Oregon are really two that I particularly look to. Phoenix is one that I think citywide a number of my peer group look to for their effectiveness in delivering services.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was wondering if there was something about yourself that you wish people knew.
Something about myself that I wish people knew. Probably that I wish people know very little about me. I'm a relatively private person. I'm in a fairly public role, so my face is out there, my voice is out there because of this kind of unique market we have in Des Moines, where weather is a pretty important commodity in Iowa. But I generally try to be a pretty private person. I'm relatively shy, I think, when it comes right down to it. I hope what people know is, not the color of my hair or the length of my hair or whatever it may be, but that I represent a group of people who work to try and support the community and provide excellent services. And that's really probably the most important thing that I would want people to know is, A, I'm a relatively introverted person. I may be in the limelight, but it's not necessarily where I would want to be. And B, that I'm privileged to work with several hundred folks who really have dedicated their careers to public service.
Okay. Let's see. When you've been out on our city streets doing what you do, has anyone ever offered you a cup of hot chocolate while you're out there?
A cup of hot chocolate? No, I'd have to say nobody's ever offered me a cup of hot chocolate, probably because I'm often out there in July, and it would be counterintuitive to do that. In the winter, I don't get out of my vehicle any more than I absolutely have to. That's probably why it's not happened. But
it can't catch up to you.
It can't catch up to me. The real kernel of your question, I think, goes to how gracious Des Moines residents are and Iowans. You and I know, as people who've lived elsewhere, having lived in Chicago, both of us having lived in Chicago at one point in our life, I remember when public officials literally had bodyguards and had death threats. And I remember when one of the mayors of Chicago did not perform well enough in a snow removal situation, and he, Michael Blandick was his name, was voted out of office, and Jane Byrne became the mayor of Chicago simply because of one piece of service delivery that I'm involved in on a regular basis. Long and short of that is Des Moines folks are great, Central Iowans are great. Even in tough times when there are things that are very adverse to them, they're very gracious to public servants generally. And although I haven't been offered hot chocolate, I've certainly received a lot of gracious greetings and a lot of gracious welcomes from folks here in Des Moines, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Great. All right. So now we're looking at our computer screen on the air. This is DesMoinesGov.org. And if you click on City Departments, and then you click once more on Public Works, you'll get it looks like a full discussion of what happens at that organization. I see flood mitigation and levee maintenance, forestry, garbage and waste, recycling, sewer management, sidewalk maintenance, snow and ice management, street maintenance, and then a lot of forms and documents that people can use to communicate directly with your department.
Right.
Does that sound like a full
plate? I think that's a good description. We certainly know that there are a number of folks who are very comfortable using the media we're using now. The internet, very important, I think, as we look forward to service delivery. There's some folks who still would want to pick up the phone and call, and we deal in service delivery with those folks too. They can call 283-4950 24 hours a day and make a service request. But we really are great believers in the power of the technology in front of you right now. And as much that can come in electronically provides, we think, a better record and better opportunity often for us to be able to timely respond to particular concerns folks have about maybe a sidewalk that's dangerous for them to walk on, or when we're going to plow out their street, or how much the stormwater utility raises in a particular year. All that data is out there on the web, and we certainly want to encourage people to use that. And if they have suggestions or concerns after looking at that, there's also a mechanism for them to bring that information to our attention. Would really welcome it. You've got a sophisticated group of folks, obviously, who are listening and watching this and who are very comfortable with this media. We'd be more than happy to hear any feedback you'd give us, both positive and, most importantly, negative, on how we